Hi, welcome to my Scream franchise ranking. With the new Scream 6 out, I've decided to go back and do a ranking of all of these movies in the series from the worst to the best. I did rewatch all of the films leading up to this. It's been quite interesting to see how my opinions on those movies have changed somewhat over the years, and it'll be interesting to add the new film in there as well. Obviously it's only going off a one-time watch on that, but it will be interesting to see. And I will say this is a really consistent horror franchise. When you think about some horror franchises and how low quality some of those movies get, Scream is definitely not that. I would genuinely recommend every single film in this series. The bottom two, I do have some things I'm a little bit more mixed about on, but no, generally speaking, these are a really good set of slasher movies and all ones that I can recommend to you. So anyway, let's get into it. And as far as spoilers go, I'm going to really do my best to avoid any kind of spoilers for the new film, but I'm going to assume that 1 to 5 is fair game. I think anyone probably watching this video is going to have already seen all of those movies, so you understand there'll be spoilers in here, but I will be as vague as I can with details when talking about Scream 6 when we get to it. So number 6 choice for me is going to be Scream 3. I know this is generally the popular one to put at the bottom, and as I said, there are some things I do still like about this. I always realise when I finish this movie, I leave it quite fondly. And I think I've realised that's because it's just got a really solid final sequence. I think everything, when they get to the mansion and they get the reveal of Roman, you know, just the single killer and the motivations for why he's been doing everything and how it ties into the family and everything. I quite like that. I do think it actually works. Of all of the third acts of these movies, I do think the reveal and the reasoning behind that is definitely one of the stronger ones in the franchise. So I did really like that. And that moment when Sidney finally kills him, holds his hand because she knows he's a family member, I do think it's quite a powerful moment as well. I did quite like that. But where this film goes down is, you know, it's for some reason this one had a much bigger budget than 1 and 2. I think it literally like doubled the budget. And, you know, it's got a very different tone and vibe to it. You know, I think it's a new writer on board, and it was set in Hollywood. He wanted to go for an even bigger, more extravagant set, and I'm not sure it works in the movie's favour. Just because I think the vibe and the feel of the Scream movies is one of the main draws to it. I think that's what people do love a lot about these movies. And with Scream 3, because it does feel so different, it does take a little bit to ease into it. But just the way it plays out isn't as interesting as it sounds. I find that a lot of the scenes kind of meander. They rehash all of the story arc with Gail and Dewey. And I just feel like a lot of the dialogue's a bit, it just goes on for too long. The scenes aren't tightened up enough. So it's a lot of sort of rambling stuff, and it feels like a lot of the scenes don't have much direction. You know, a lot of scenes just sort of thrown in there, and you're kind of like, well, you could have easily trimmed that out the movie, because this movie already feels too long as it is, like a 2-hour movie, and a lot of the scenes in here just kind of felt thrown in there just for the hell of it. So you can definitely feel the length in this one because of that. And the other one thing I really don't like about this is that whole nasty backstory they give to Sidney's mum, Maureen Prescott. I feel because Sidney's kind of already been through that arc of understanding who her mum was and the fact that she was having this secret life and everything, to kind of delve back into it further here and have it that she was this aspiring actress that was trading off sexual favours with these big time movie producers. I don't like the vibe of that in this film for Sidney's character. I just think for them to go back to this and make it even more of a mean-spirited kind of backstory behind her, I don't think it really works for the film. I think it's unnecessarily grim for a character like Sidney. And especially as well when you consider Miramax with a film like the producers behind this at the time and what was going on there. Just the whole thing about that doesn't quite sit right to me. So I think they definitely could have done something very different with that. But as I say, it's still a solid film. It's still good fun. I would still just about recommend it. It's a decent time. So yeah, as you say, for a worse film in the franchise, it's still a pretty solid entry. So my number 5 choice is going to be Scream 4. And I know a lot of people really like this entry. And as I said, I do still enjoy it. I think it's still a very fun movie. It kind of recaptures the feeling from the original 2 films. I like having the old cast back here. I think Sidney's particularly good. You know, given that she's a little bit older now and knows herself better and how to deal with situations, I really like that. And there are some memorable sequences definitely throughout. There's a particularly good sequence at a film festival that two of the film students are hosting, where Gale's kind of setting up these cameras around, trying to find out what's going on, which I really liked. And also the addition of the new cast member of Kirby. I think she's really good fun. She's better in this film as well than Scream 6 when she's first introduced here. She's a real scene stealer, and I really do enjoy the dynamic that she kind of brings to this group. My main problem with Scream 4, though, is that the final act and the reveals, they go on for way too long. Way too, like, there's about 20 minutes of the main killer, Jill, where she's monologuing about why she's doing what she's doing. And it's like I said, I'm going to say this about a lot of these third acts, they get very, very over the top, and this is one of those where it's just a long time of her, you know, going over all these reasons and dancing around her you know, motivations for getting involved and doing this and doing the killing. And I don't know, I found myself tiring of it slightly. And then the fact that at the end of that she's only knocked out, they go to the hospital, and then the film should long have ended by this point. There's another extended scene at the hospital with, you know, her taking out more of the characters. And for me, it just stretched things a little bit too far. I think they needed a better way to wrap this film up. But I always leave kind of wondering if I like Scream 3 a little bit more, just because of how much more solid that final act is. But yeah, so when I watched the two films recently together, I'm like, this is a better film, but yeah, the final act is unfortunately a bit of a letdown. But still a very solid entry in the franchise for sure. So my number 4 choice, the new one, Scream 6. I think it's got a lot of very, very intense sequences. I don't know if it's just because it's one of the first ones that I've seen at the big screen, and I just really got into the vibe of it. You know, it was a packed out cinema, and I just had a really good time watching it. A lot of great sequences. The one on the subway that you will have seen in the trailers, I thought was really well done. And just having that different vibe, setting it in New York, I think was quite an interesting way to go as well. And there is some standout moments here. There's a lot of really brutal standout sequences. I liked that they developed the relationship between Sam and Tara further. I think the two actresses that play those girls are just fantastic as well. I think it made it so that I didn't feel like we were missing Sydney too much in the film. I think that was actually one of my issues I have with 5, is I felt her inclusion in that wasn't particularly strong, and I thought, you know, maybe it is finally time to move on to these new characters, and here they do that, and they carry it really, really well. The things I think that brought this one down a little bit to me, the more I think about it, is definitely the reveals in the final act. You know, who the killers end up being and their motivations. And again, like I think I'll criticise this for a few of the films in the franchise, but just the over-the-top nature of it, how crazy and insane it all goes, and the motivations for why they're doing it. I just don't think they're anywhere near as strong. When you compare to the original, I feel like that set the bar for where, you know, how good the reveals and the twists of it can be, and this definitely does not live up to that. So that is a little bit of a letdown, I think. I will be interested to see on rewatch though, like to see the moments of how they put out the groundwork and the details to keep you guessing. I certainly didn't guess who the killers were, which was good. So I did enjoy going along for the ride, but just, yeah, the more I think about it, the more those reveals I don't think are particularly strong when compared to some of the other films in the franchise. So still a really fun entry though. I will definitely watch this one again. Had a really good time seeing it. And for a 6th movie in a franchise, it's pretty damn good. So my number 3 choice is going to be Scream 5. This one's actually the most recent rewatch for me. I literally just finished watching that before doing this ranking video because I wanted to be sure of my thoughts on this film. I saw it a year ago when it first came out, and I liked it, but I wasn't sure that I loved it. So I just kind of wanted to go back and see how I felt about it on a rewatch. And I have to say, this one is the one out of all of these rewatches that has gone up the most for me. I had a really good time seeing this one again. And I think it's just this time round, I just got way more into the characters. Maybe that's because of seeing Scream 6 as well recently. But just these characters of Sam and Tara, I really got into their stories. I absolutely loved Dewey in this film, and I do think his death does pack a real emotional punch. You know, even though you're kind of shouting at the character a little bit for going back into that hall in the hospital when he dies, you kind of think, oh, they had to do that. But it's still a really sad moment when he dies, and I do think it does have the emotion. I do just think there's some scenes in here with characters kind of reconnecting and seeing Dewey and Gale back together and talking about how things broke up, and I really like those moments. I think they really do make the film. And on top of that, it just feels, just from a filmmaking perspective as well, I think this one just looks extremely good. It's very well directed. It gets back to being really sharp again, probably the most so since the original. I think just very sharp dialogue, cut down, just very, very tight movie. And yeah, just really had a good time with this. I think the reveals as well, I do like how crazy it gets, especially the reveal of Amber. I think Amber she was great for playing this role, just how crazy she gets to the reveal at the end. And I do like as well, watching this back, I remembered who the killers were and seeing all the little moments they put in there to catch people out. It was great. I think it was really good. I know some people did say that the reveal was a bit obvious, especially with Richie. And watching it again, it's hard to judge because I didn't guess it the first time, but watching it this time, you're like, oh, okay, there's a few moments there that do make it very obvious. But to be fair, you know, when I go along with these, I do try and let myself just get invested in the film. I don't try too hard to pay attention to every detail to think, oh, is that them? I do like to kind of play out naturally to me and take in the information as it comes. But for me, it works well enough. The whole sequence at the house at the end is very good. I really quite enjoyed that. So yeah, it's a really solid entry in the franchise, and it's gone up a lot for me, this one. I do think it's definitely my third choice, and it's really, really close with number 2 for me. I was really deciding between the two of them, but still going to come in at number 3, but a really, really solid film in the Scream franchise. My number 2 choice is going to be Scream 2. I really love Scream 2. I think, you know, when you consider it came out a year after the original, it's as solid as it possibly could have been. I think all of the, you know, the kind of commentary and the jokes on the sequels, the horror sequels, I think works extremely well. Extremely tight dialogue, a lot of really fun scenes, especially with characters like Randy there kind of leading a lot of that. I think are just so enjoyable to watch. I just love going on the ride for this one, especially the first half of the movie. Every single scene I'm so entertained by, and because of that, it's a very, very rewatchable film. And I think the story arc between Gale and Dewey is definitely the strongest here. I love their relationship here and how it kind of builds up over the movie. There's some particularly standout sequences as well, with, you know, one particular one in the radio station with the soundproof glass where Ghostface is in there with Dewey and Gale as they're working certain things out. I really love that scene. And the other one that always stands out to me is the scene in the FBI car when they crash and they've got Ghostface in the front. And yeah, that to me was just such a nail-biting scene where they work out that they have to kind of crawl over Ghostface unconscious in the front out the window. Absolutely love that sequence. It's one of definitely the more memorable, tense segments of all, I'd say, scenes of all of the Scream franchise. So really enjoy that. Again, the only thing that does bring it down from the original for me quite a bit is, again, those reveals. I do just think the motivations are a little bit weak, perhaps, and again, just very theatrical, very over the top. And I think I said this in my review, but it feels like you're kind of watching a stage play when you watch that final bit, and it's on the stage where Sidney's been kind of doing the theatre work with the film school. It's just so over the top. The kind of monologuing from the two characters just does get a bit crazy. I think the actors' portrayals are good, but it's just so ramped up that it feels very animated and just a little bit too over the top for my taste, and just won't be as memorable to me as those reveals from the original. It's definitely one of the strongest sequels out there. I think if I did a list of my favourite sequels, this one would be right up there. Again, it's another really rewatchable film, a brilliant entry, and it's going to be my number 2 choice. My number 1 choice is, of course, though, going to be the original Scream. So yeah, this is one of my favourite movies of all time and probably my favourite horror movie ever made. It's an endlessly rewatchable film for me. I just think there's so many memorable moments from Scream that I can't praise enough. You know, everything from that incredible opening sequence that just grabs you straight away, with Drew Barrymore when she first has the killer kind of call her up and the way she gets taken out. It's an insane scene to have before the opening credits. You've got just an absolutely brilliant cast here, a great character to follow in Sidney Prescott, definitely one of the best leading characters we've ever had in a horror film, if not the best ever. And yeah, just so many memorable moments from this film. I think the reveals for me have just always stuck with me. That's the one thing as well that this has above all of the previous sequels, is the reveals of Stu and Billy. They just stick with you. They're scary. The motivations were convincing, and just the contrast between having this one person who's psychotic but has kind of motivations linked to emotional reasons as to why he's doing this, and then also having his partner being someone who's just absolutely insane and does what he wants because he's just crazy. Basically, it just worked extremely well. This is a film that basically reinvented horror in the mid-90s. It did something very fresh, had a very new take on the genre, and was incredibly influential. If you look at all the movies that came after that, you know, in the late 90s, the early noughties, they all had that kind of vibe of Scream, and it's because of the success and how good this film really was. And you know, it was a film as well that had social commentary in there. It was talking about, you know, the effect of cinema violence on people, talking about how young people are desensitized to certain situations. Had a lot going on. Had a lot going on with it. It's quite a rich film, and I love the kind of commenting and referencing to horror. I think it does take a bit to people get used to if you hadn't seen a film like this before. I can imagine it might have been polarizing in some ways with the kind of style it did that, but it just works incredibly well. And every time I watch this again, I'm just amazed by, you know, how precise and how brilliant this film was. It's Wes Craven's best film he ever did, hands down. You know, above Nightmare on Elm Street, I think this is easily the best film that he ever made. It's a 5-star classic horror film, and absolutely I recommend this to anyone I meet who is interested in film. I always tell them Scream is one you have to see in your life. So yeah, definitely deserving of my #1 spot. It's a brilliant horror film. So thank you very much for watching this video. I'm going to leave some cards throughout this to link you to some of my reviews I've done for the movies in the Scream franchise. 3, 4 and 5 I unfortunately didn't get around to doing in time, just life getting in the way, so I wanted to do the new movie when it came out, but I will go back and upload those reviews so I can give you a bit more of my in-depth thoughts on those particular entries. But also do let me know in the comments what your ranking would be for these films. It's always quite interesting to see in a big franchise like this now, which entries worked for you the best, as I know there are a lot of different opinions on this. A lot of these entries worked and didn't work so well for different people. So it's very interesting to see that, so do let me know yours. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.